Welcome back to Job Tales. Nina Lauterbach works for a company that specializes in transplantation immunology. She's a biologist by education. If you like science studies and want to be working in a team that applies that knowledge on the field, then this is a job you may be considering. And here we start. Nina Lauterbach, field application scientist. Can you spend a couple of words and describe your profession?
Yes, so I'm Nina Lauterbach, and since about last 5 years, I have been working as a field application scientist in the field of transplantation immunology. So to keep it a bit brief, maybe as a field application scientist, what you do is you have to provide technical and also scientific support to the customers who are using our product. So they are all within transplantation immunology. So meaning these are laboratories who do DNA typing based on a DNA. They type patient and donor for transplantation, and this can be solid organ transplantation or stem cell transplantation. And we provide products that make it able for them to do this DNA typing. So we have the reagents and we provide software. And we as a field application scientists, we support the labs to use the products correctly. We go there and we train them to use these products. So the reagents, we show them how to use the lab workflow, how to use our software properly, how to interpret the results, how to analyze the results. So we train the lab people, and then later on, we also maintain these customers. We troubleshoot whenever there is an issue. They will always contact us, and we help them to solve this issue. And this can be either virtually or on site, so that we physically go there. So obviously our name says field application scientist. So about 50%. Yeah, about 50%. Most of the trainings we try to give on site because it is a lab workflow. So meaning really, pipetting reagents and with the DNA that they have. So the best way of training a person is to really do it on site. So we go there and we show them what the protocol is, what the workflow is, what kind of steps, what they need to do, and we help them.
Mm-hmm. So let's actually take a step back because, of course, this is very specific, a specific field. It's medical, it's about transplantation. So you studied what kind of subject at university?
So at the university, I did not have any idea yet which direction I wanted to go. So actually the study that I did at that moment had little to do really with transplantation per se. In my master's though, I did a bachelor in health science, and in my master, I then did internship more into the molecular biology field. So it had nothing to do yet with transplantation, but I knew that I wanted to go into the research side. I loved molecular biology, so anything to do with DNA and RNA. And then I got the opportunity to start a PhD in a transplant immunology laboratory or tissue typing laboratory, either way you can name it. And so I spent about 5 to 6 years there as a scientist, and I there obtained my PhD. So it's really within my PhD that I got the knowledge and the experience in a transplantation lab. Because like you said, it's very specific, it's a very specialized field, yeah.
So you are a biologist by education, is that right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so you're and before university, what did you study? So I was trying to backtrack and funnel down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Before my university, I even did I did 1 year of it was I'm trying to figure how it's named in English. It's sort of a social work. It's more to the social science, actually, what I did for a year after I finished college, because I didn't really have any idea yet what I wanted to do. I always thought I wanted to go into the health sector, that part, but I never knew that I really wanted to move into science. I was still struggling between medicine or science.
I
But to
see.
do that, I had to do one extra year. So I went in for more of a social direction, because I was also thinking about helping people in a different way, more into the child protection area, that sort of things. I was thinking about that then. And yeah, we're talking
Oh,
now about 20 years ago. And
yeah.
right, so it's a long time. But at that time, during that year, I met some people, and I figured out that that's totally not what I wanted. And I met some people who were more in the science direction, and I knew that that was what I wanted to do. I was thinking either more pathology or really science. So no, at that moment, I actually had no idea. I just knew I wanted to help people in some way, either going into the health direction, the medicine, or into science. So, and then yeah, I went to health science study, because that was most logical at that moment.
Yeah, you knew more or less that you were into science, that you were into helping people and possibly studying medicine, but you were not completely sure what to do. And because I'm trying to get into the mind of a young person who is in your situation 20 years ago, and is trying to figure out what to do in life, but doesn't have a clear path, and maybe doesn't have a knowledge of what could be like, even maybe field application is something that could be resonating, but how do you get there? So did you find that it was helpful during your studies? There was something that was helpful to realize, or was it, encounters with professionals over the course of your years that was determining for your final decision? How was it for you?
Right. So actually, for me to make the decision to go towards field application scientist really came later on. When I was younger and I was just starting my studies, I had no idea actually this profession existed. I had no idea that there was this option to do this. When I started as a student, and you go and start health science, and the number one option that people provide you is doing a PhD, and then you stay being a scientist. You do a PhD, you do a postdoc, and then hopefully maybe even associate professor or whatever, but you will stay within that academics. So that is where I struggled a lot when I was younger. When I started the studies, I didn't know really what kind of options there were. I always knew that science and medicine, biology, immunology, it interested me a lot. But what kind of options there were for profession were always very difficult for me. So when I finished my master, the only sort of option I saw at that moment was a PhD. And you don't have a lot of options also there, because there needs to be an opportunity that they are searching for a PhD student. And so it's not like you can just go wherever you want, or you can select immunology or pathology. It's not like that. They have certain open positions, and that's it. I remember at that time there was an open position also at cardiology, and an open position at transplant immunology. And so I had a choice at least for both of them, so a PhD at either of them. And because immunology always triggered me a lot, so I went to transplantation immunology. So I did a PhD there. But also then at that time, I never really knew what kind of other things you could do. And when you start in science and you start a PhD, like I said, being a researcher is the way to go. And if going into company is sort of seen like you're going towards the dark side. It's like a no-go because it's industry, and that's definitely something you don't want to be doing. But doing my PhD, I learned a lot of the disadvantages actually of the academics, and I got to know people from the industry and who were doing technical support, scientific support, FAWs. And so that's how really doing my PhD, I got to know this part.
Because you were saying that when you do your PhD, it's really to get into research, and then you are more like within the academic environment, I guess. But you did, however, have a direct contact with people who were doing field work. Is that right?
Right. You mainly get to know them when you go in conferences. As a researcher, you need to go in conferences. You get to know people of companies because you're using their products, So that's what I'm doing now as a FAS. I'm going into labs, and I have also really steady customers, so I know them a lot. And that's what I had at that time as well. I got to know people from company because I was using their products in the lab to do my research. And that's how I got to learn their work, what they're doing. So that's how it became sort of an option. But it really it was only really at the end of my PhD that I really thought, okay, I think I want to go into industry and not stay in academic.
And how long did it take you to complete your PhD?
So I started in 2008 and I finished it in 2000, really finished it in 2013. So it was 4.5 years, because the last half of the year, like last 6 months or last year, you're actually more finishing the last part of because you need to write a thesis. You need to, in the Netherlands, you need to write a big book, a thesis. It needs to be looked at by different professors. You need to arrange your reception, your party. Everything needs to be arranged. It's quite a very official event. So that is most of the last part of PhD.
Okay. And then do you find it was like, are companies looking for PhD to be a field application sciences, or do you think you somebody could step into this job without a PhD?
Companies tend to prefer people with a PhD. So when I'm now looking for candidates, I'm not specifically looking at a PhD. It's not black and white like that. But a PhD gives a lot of advantages because you're trained in thinking critically and analytically. And this is something you don't learn if you're just working in a lab. So it gives you a lot of advantages there, really the scientific part of it, because you really need to do your own experiments. You need to design your own experiments. You need to and publish them. And so it gives you a lot of advantages that you have that way of thinking, and then to be able to support the laboratories yourself, to support the products. However, it's not a big must, because I actually have colleagues that do not have a PhD and they do perfectly well. However, they do have then years of experience working in a laboratory, so it's not like you come from university and you can immediately start as a FOSS. Most of the time that's not really possible, depending on the field, but most of the time you will need to have really laboratory experience. You need to understand how laboratory workflows work, how do you need to process this, how you need to look at results. It's really, especially for a field that I'm in, which is more specialized, transplantation immunology. If you don't have any experience looking at this kind of data, then it will be very difficult to support, the labs, obviously.
It makes me think that it is very specific. I mean, your job, transplantation immunology is something that you're really breathing it for years. Now, if you were to change sector, and say using your skills and your PhD, what kind of other industries could you apply for?
The field that I'm in right now is quite specialized. However, this field uses technologies that are also used in many other fields. So I do have a lot of knowledge experience based on transplantation. However, we make use of technology like next generation sequencing, Oxford nanopore technology, which are also used in general in the genetics world, also in cancer immunology, viral immunology. So it's not like if you've worked in a specialized field that you cannot work anywhere else anymore, because a lot of times the technologies are used in all kinds of fields. So then I could for sure switch. Then you would have to, be trained more specifically on those products, but the technologies, that stays the same.
I see. So you would have the skills to be able to match, just to understand if there are options and alternatives when, with your base, because you've taken so many years specializing and studying, of course, in between the PhD, your university, etc., and experience. Yeah. So and is it a field that where change is welcome, or is it rather like you stay in a company? Once you start in a company, you stay in a company?
Well, I must say the field of transplantation immunology, a lot of people, if they start in it, they stay. If they ever start with HLA and transplantation, they will stay there for a long time. But I see that changing a bit now the last years, that people tend to switch around more often and even leave the field. I've seen that now around me as well, with some ex-colleagues that I know that they worked for many years in transplantation, but now they're actually working for a company which provides technologies for different kinds of fields. So it's really a company that provides a certain platform and that transplantation can use, oncology can use. So I see that now more often, that people can switch. But overall, you can see that when people start in transplantation, they want to stick to it, because if you have years of experience and knowledge within that field, it's like a safe zone. That's what you know. And because it is so specialized, it is quite difficult to find new candidates for it. So that's why also companies want to hold on to these kind of people, because it is quite difficult to find them. So that's the advantage of going into sort of a niche specialized market, that you then sometimes can even more easily find a job, because it is quite difficult to find someone with that specialized background.
How did you find your first job? Was it easy? Like, did you have to look a long time, or because of this specialized niche, was it easy for you?
So that lab was using products of that company that I was working for at that time. Via a colleague at that time, he told me, hey, I know that they're searching for a technical sales specialist within the company, and that was also a transplant immunology company. So that lady who was searching for such a person at that time, she came to me and she said, "Hey, I'm looking for someone, with transplantation, with HLA knowledge." They already actually were at I think the second or third round of interviews, and they've interviewed a couple of people, but none of them had any background in transplantation. So then she said, okay, actually we are already later on in the interview, but you have the exact background what we're looking for. So would you be interested? So I was like, yeah, I'm finishing my PhD and I actually want to go into industry. It's fine. For me, the sales part was very new though. So that was a technical sales specialist position. And now I'm a field application scientist. So I have nothing to do anymore with sales.
With sales. Okay.
Right. And that was a technical sales function. So I was like, I don't have any sales experience. And she was, no, that's fine. You can learn that part. But the background, the immunology, the transplantation background, that is something you cannot learn within a few months,
Right.
So I prefer to hire someone like that and then to learn so you can be trained on the sales. So that's how I started, how I found an entrance into the industry. So it was due to my background that there was this entrance.
Okay, perfect. And so the customer side, so the sales side, does not apply to you anymore as a FAST, so as a field application scientist?
So the field application scientist that a part that I'm doing now, it's pre-sales and post-sales. For a field application scientist, it can be sometimes that they say it's only pre-sales or it's only post-sales. I have nothing to do anymore with prospecting. That's how they call it. That you have to call a lab and say, hey, this is the product that we have. Would you be interested in trying it? This is not what I'm doing. We have sales people for that, so they do these cold calls that we call it. They will try to get people, the interest of people, and then once a lab says, hey, this actually sounds interesting, yeah, I would like to try your product, then the field application scientist comes in. And we are doing the pre and the post sale. So once that happened, then us as field application scientists, we will contact the lab and we say, hey, so we heard that you're interested, so we are going to arrange a demonstration for you. We're going to your lab and we will show you what the product entails. So that is the part as a field application scientist. And then once they've used it, the product, and they feel like, okay, this is something we want to use in routine in our lab, so they're becoming routine customers, then they will become your customers. So whenever there is an issue, then also they will contact us, the field application scientists, and say, hey, I have this strange result. Can you help me with that? I don't know how to interpret it, or something went wrong in the process. Can you help me with that? So it's anything to do with training and then troubleshooting. That is where the field application scientist comes in. So we have nothing to do anymore with taking orders or placing orders or trying to get new customers. And this is what I was also doing with the first job. I was a technical sales specialist, but it was for a smaller region. I was working for the Benelux, and as a FOSS, I work for EMEA. So actually everything outside of the United States.
Yes, basically. And what do you enjoy most about your profession today?
So what I enjoy most is the ability to train people, to teach them, to help them. The communication part of the job is just really nice. I always liked the training part, the teaching. Also, when I was a PhD student, I enjoyed it to help other students with internships. And so this is what, as a FOS, you are a trainer, you are a teacher. You have to train laboratory people who have never used a certain technology before. You need to be able to help them to use that technology. And it's not like you're teaching them how to use an iPhone or how to use you're not selling a refrigerator. You're helping them to use really laboratory workflow within a clinical setting. So our product helps them to get results, patient results, clinical data that helps them to decide whether or not a patient should be transplanted with a certain donor. That's where the training part is very essential, and the support, the scientific support, is very essential, because you're really helping clinicians, helping scientific peoples to really make decisions for patients. And that is the part I really enjoy. It gives me a lot of fulfillment, which I didn't have before as a PhD student when I was working in research, which I did find now.
So it's more hands-on. And do you actually get to see the final result on a patient, like a life-changing result, I would guess, because if he can get a transplantation, it will definitely save his life. Do you get to go all the way to the end of the process?
Oh, I wish, but unfortunately, no. Like even a lot of times in the lab themselves, so in the laboratory where they run the tests to decide which kind of DNA type the patient and the donor have. And then they will say to the clinician, okay, the patient and the donor, they are a match, so you can go ahead with the transplantation. A lot of times then the laboratory even doesn't see really the result. Very, very few times we get to hear about it, but it happens rarely because there are so many tests, so many patients and donors, so many experiments that the clinical part is not really the part that we will see. It's the preclinical part. We do see it when we go into conferences and we talk to customers, and sometimes we also participate. We help with certain studies, and that is where you do see, the effect of the product.
Is there a lesson you've learned in the past that others could benefit from?
Yeah, for sure, not to take things too personal. As a FOSS, a lot of times you run into issues because that is when people, so you're there for training, but a lot of times you're there for troubleshooting. So when laboratory reach out to you, it's almost always with an issue. Something is not working well and you need to try to solve that, and it's a clinical labs, they want to have the solution now. And sometimes the unit cannot provide that solution, and it can be sometimes frustrating for them, and you want to give it as fast as you can, but sometimes you cannot find a solution. And so when you run into situation like this, or that the first demonstration doesn't go well, and so you run into issue after issue after issue, it can be very frustrating. For some people, it can be a bit demotivating. So when new FOSS people start doing this job, I always tell them, these things will happen. You will run into issues, and that's okay. That's totally fine. You will learn from them. And sometimes you cannot solve it immediately. Also, you don't have the solution right there in the palm of your hand. You need to work for it a bit, and you also have help around you. It's okay. In the end, you will find a solution, but don't take it personal if lab personnel gets frustrated, or it's that's our job. We are there most of the times when there are issues. So when things are going well, we hardly hear it. People don't tell us, hey, great great product that you have, I have fantastic results, that was a great training. Most of the time you just hear, oh my god, what is going on here? I don't understand what is happening now. I did everything well, but still I have a crappy result, and then you need to try to calm them down, and so that can be sometimes
Frustrating.
demotivating.
Yeah, demotivating.
Yeah.
I know what you mean, because I work in sales, and it's mostly the after sales is a lot of troubleshooting, and I think a lot of people in their line of work do get these frustrating moments. So it's part of life and part of work life for sure. So yeah, it's a good advice, to be prepared and to not expect to just have flowers and roses being thrown at you, but just and do your job as good as you can. That's with a smile, possibly.
Absolutely. Possibly with a smile, and just try to trust on the knowledge that you have, and try to trust in yourself as well. And if you cannot find it, well, then you will try to figure it out in a different way. You will try, you always have help around you, or, so I always say at some point you will get there, you will always find a solution in the end.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you very much, Nina, for your time. This has been very enlightening, especially for me, because I didn't know your job at all. And I wish you all the best for the future, and I'll see you another time.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for this opportunity.
And this was episode 51 of Job Tales. Stay tuned, as there are more interviews to come. I would love to hear what you think of my podcast and what suggestion you have to make it grow. Please write me at jobtalespodcast@gmail.com.